What does a 44-year-old former tax inspector know about ruling a nation, let alone a country with vast population and a lot of backlog, let's be honest? So we are going to be dealing with Senegal, the recent drawbacks in the practice of democracy across the continent, the country recording her youngest president-elect could be a sign on the right path for the country and for Africa at large. But can we ever fully predict how issues will pan out? No. But we can guarantee our devotion to discussion on pressing matters like this. Hello and welcome to Report Desk Africa. And this is one program where journalists say it as it is without mincing words. I'm your host, Blessings Musugu, and I'm not alone.
And I am Nii Omani. Good to see you guys one more time. Indeed, everyone's mind is clogged with questions and their hearts saddened by the heart-wrenching losses. The burial of the deceased military personnel from Delta State unrest happened recently. Now, peace-building efforts are underway as the Delta State government announced their measures to rebuild trust and address security concerns. I am Nii Omani, and this is Report Desk Africa, a program where we dissect crucial topics for better understanding, your understanding.
Now, before we dive deep into this week's conversation, let's take you through the stories that we did track in the news last week. Now, we told you that President Bola Tinubu introduced a 3-month ban on ministers and other government officials from going on publicly funded foreign trips. We also did inform you about the bill proposing a new structure of salaries and allowances for judicial officers in Nigeria, which passed the third reading at the House of Representatives.
And finally, we informed you about the Senegal presidential election, which ushers us into our first topic of the day as we begin with Senegal. The West African country just hit a milestone, an event that might just, sport the country into an interpid era. Now, then secondly, we turn our attention to the oil-producing state in Nigeria, Delta State. Grab a seat. We'll be right back after the break.
Thank you for staying with us on Report Desk Africa. Now let's dive straight in. In a historic outcome of what seemed to be a very dramatic election period, 44-year-old Basiru Diomaye Faye, a relatively unknown figure until recently, and I said relatively because just very few people knew him as a tax inspector, claimed a surprise victory in the just concluded presidential election in Senegal. Isn't that terrific? Set to become Senegal's youngest president and Africa's youngest elected president ever, and spending 11 months in jail before being released on an amnesty 2 weeks prior to the elections, Faye's journey to presidency has been remarkable, to say the least.
It's been a very, very, interesting time in Senegal, I would say. And now we're joined by a senior journalist and public affairs analyst based in Senegal, Dakar, the capital, especially Imo Edet. Imo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good evening.
From the smiles on your face already, I'm as I said, as I was speaking with you during the break, it's a happy time to be a Senegalese, wouldn't you say?
Well, indeed. From your intro, I knew. He has made history, and he's going to remain in history for a long time to come. Like you said, it's an interesting time to be here and to be part of, this historic period.
It's also such a beautiful thing to see that he won the election on his birthday.
Right? double.
Yes.
Okay, so but let's dig in, because we can't leave out the back and forth on election dates and the weeks of protests. Senegal finally went to the polls last week Sunday with Faye emerging the winner and the president-elect as it stands now. What does this mean for Senegal, considering the country will now be ruled by a much younger person, the youngest ever in Senegal?
Well, I wish this had happened in Nigeria. I would have been so elated. But all the same, it's an amazing period. Let me just take you back 2 years ago when the entire plan for this election started. The chaos that heralded the March 24 date. Started with Sonko, who eventually was the least dead from the electoral roll, and he had to put his right-hand man, Bashir Diomaye Faye. He's actually the general secretary. He's the general secretary of their party, PASTEP, and because of the entire crisis they had with the state, the defamation case, they had to dissolve PASTEP. So he was also thrown into prison alongside Sonko and other political prisoners. I mean, like you mentioned, it was the amnesty law that really gave way and allowed him to contest in this election. Other than that, I think himself and Sonko would actually remain in jail. But I think it's an interesting moment and how it all started. The fact that very, like you mentioned, people really don't know much about this man. He is like the regular environmental inspector or officer in Nigeria who goes, from house to house to check how your environment is. He is like that in the area of tax. He is relatively unknown until when Sonko decided to mention him. And even when he mentioned him, journalists were still trying to really gather the information about who this man is and what kind of confidence does Sonko really has that believes this man can win the election. And really, it worked for them. He was like, what he did was to put four opposition, in the electoral roll, four of them. Two decided to back out a day to the election, which was rejected by the Constitutional Council, and then they decided to give their vote to Faye. And this is what we have now. The youngest president, the fifth president of the Republic, and the youngest in Africa. Let's hope that Sonko will guide him. Sonko maybe a little bit more experienced than him. And of course, we'll be able to guide him and show him how to run the country.
I mean, we do get that for Sonko to have mentioned him, like you said, there must have been a level of credibility. And like you said, it's also known that Faye was only a tax inspector before now. How big of a deal would we say that is, and how he went from holding a random position to being the president of Senegal? And we've seen that, Sonko is convinced, but it's another thing to convince the entire people of Senegal that he is ready for the job. But let's also take into cognizance the fact that a few persons did know him while he was a tax inspector. And one thing they said about him was that he fought for workers' rights in his own little way. At least he made a name for himself in that regard. So would you say that this is based on his track record? Or again, this is just hope against hope. Let's see if he can deliver. Yeah.
No, I don't think it's about his track record because, like we have stated, very few Senegalese really know about him. The fact is, Senegalese just wanted an election. Senegalese wanted a case where the elite rulers, were taken out, and that was what played out. What he got was sympathy votes by the people. People were really tired of the drama President Macky Sall was, putting up, fixing one date, canceling, moving the date to another. People knew he had a third-term agenda, which, didn't work out. As a result of that, people were like, look, we're going to vote this guy in whether the ruling class likes it or not. And I must say that this is a new generation of politicians. Sonko is hardly known, except that he is the mayor of Ziguinchor, a region in the southern part of the country. Other than that, people don't really know much about him. But the belief is whoever comes in will change, the climate, the how the economy is, how Senegal is working, and how things have always been. People want a change from the norm, and that was what they got. Even those we spoke to who went to vote for, they told us clearly, look, we're voting for this man, whether Macky Sall likes it or not. And not because they know him, but because they feel, these guys they've been in prison for 8 months. Why don't we compensate them by voting for them? And that was what happened. I mean, if you're talking about track records, really nothing of an exercise can be said about him, rather than he being a tax inspector and the former general secretary of the defunct or dissolved Pastor Party, which he and Sonko belong to.
True, because I heard about a year ago, nobody really knew anything about him. So it's just almost like 11 months in prison and, of course, now in the spotlight. But let's talk about the game changer in the electoral process. Voter turnout was about 61.3%, which is huge. I've seen that now. I can't remember last time I saw such turnout in any African country presidential election, no matter what it is. But what demographic would you say actually occupied most of this turned out, because I do remember, yes, everyone was fed up. There was the economic hardship. There was a time Senegal was a hotbed of crisis recently in the news with the old riots and everything. In fact, breakdown of internet connections and so many other sanctions also that the government trying to put in place to ensure that there is peace in the land. But is it the youth? Is it the older people? Is it the men? Is it the female? Is there a particular demographic that actually came out to say, you know what, enough is enough? And let's talk about the election process. Was it free, fair, and credible? Because that's one of the things African countries have dealt with over years. And we've seen elections year in, year out, especially even in Nigeria recently, and we know what came out.
Well, for the demographics, first of all, I would like to use the report of the African Union, the ECOWAS observation mission, and also the EU mission. I mean, all of them gave 100% pass to the conduct of the polls. It was clearly transparent. We were on the field across the region where we can hear in Dakar. And for me as a foreigner, I learned a whole lot knowing how election is being conducted in my country and also observing an election here, which was clear, which was transparent, which was fair. Everybody were part of the election. Now, for the demographics, we can't really say we had a larger percentage of young people. Yes, prior to the election, we saw young people, hitting the streets, protesting, demonstrating on the beck and calls of Osman Sonko and Jemai Faye, but it didn't really translate to the high votes that it got. Those who voted more, men and women, and especially the elderly, the elderly were really tired of all of this issues put up by the ruling coalition or the ruling government. We didn't really see much of the young people. Now, young people can come out to the street and demonstrate and protest, but not all of them do have the national ID or the voters card, which was used on that day. So that is just the only thing that, takes them out. Other than the regular support, amassing the crowd of young people, to multiply your voices, ripple your voices and all of that. Yes, they are there. But in terms of reflecting that on the polls, we didn't see that happen. But rather what we saw was more of, the irregular men and women, new time voters. The disabled also play a big role, and the aged ones. So they came out in their numbers to vote. And you mentioned over 60% of the vote. Senegal is about a little bit above 11 million in terms of the general population. And we saw over 7 million coming out to vote. It tells us clearly that these people want to be part of the process, and they were part of the process. From the reports we've had and covered, the foreign observers all gave them a pass. It was very inclusive, it was transparent, and it was clear. Sunday evening, an hour or two after the polls closed, we knew who was going to be the winner. The entire country erupted into celebration because of how transparent their system is compared to what we've seen. I mean, I have covered election in Sierra Leone, and I know what we saw even before they went for a second round. Same with Liberia. There are always transparent issues or transparency issues and issues of accountability. You don't know who is who. Here, it was very clear. And I think countries should learn from Senegal. Senegal may be a small country, but they try to keep their things very straight. The entire process, the Constitutional Council, that is the highest electoral body in the country, was there guiding the entire process. So it was very transparent, and Nigerian observers who came, made a case that why can't INEC, instead of bringing out the Beavers machine and all of those elements, which come into play during the election, why don't you use a single card? And that was what happened here. A national ID card was what the voters used to vote. And so if you don't have a national ID card, it's as good as not having a passport. So these are some of the things that they have to do and really, lay the foundation for them. At the end of the day, people were really committed. They gave good grades. I mean, they haven't seen an election this transparent, an election that barely 24 hours into the polls, the heavyweight, I mean, the main coalition candidate called in, conceded, the remaining 16, 17 candidate conceded. The incumbent president conceded and called to congratulate Jemai Faye. So what are we saying? Why can't we learn lessons from Senegal? And I think, like you mentioned, it's really an interesting moment for one to be around here and see how this new layer of situation will unveil. Just like the onions, you open, you see new peel, you wrap, you see new body. That is how this country will be in the next 5 years.
Right. I'm actually glad that, we went that direction, because when we're talking about democratic challenges, we didn't see much of that. Yes, there were hitches and glitches before the elections, but then a lot of people would say that Faye didn't exactly have a Herculean task, when it comes to winning, because it was, like you said, very transparent. And that country will know that it's one of the most democratically stable compared to other countries, just as you have mentioned. But when it comes time for a new president to assume office, there is the part of democracy which has to a large extent been conquered by Faye and his administration. But there's also the part of administrative challenges. And one of the major challenges that we can say that Faye is going to be inheriting by the new, with his new administration, is the issue of youth unemployment, which has been made worsened by the speed at which the population is growing. And this also happened to be on top of Faye's campaign list. So do we see the new president providing solutions to the problem of unemployment in the country?
Well, they presented an 80-page document as a manifesto, which was pretty much for everybody to read and go through. But like you mentioned, unemployment tops their plan, and we're hoping to see how that will, that will be formulated, because we've known them to always talk about corruption, reviewing some of the oil contract that was signed with the, with foreign investors, and they're trying to get off the clinch of France. That has been their top agenda on the campaign. Aside the youth unemployment, which you talked about, they also want to change the currency. They want to bring up a national currency for Senegal. Initially, that was what they told us. But after winning the election, maybe they have had conversation with people who are into the economy and know very well about the situation. They have, we've seen them rescind on their decisions. Okay, we may not really take Senegal out of the CFA current monetary union, but we will try and strengthen the currency with the other 7 members of the WEMU monetary union. So there's a whole lot they need to do. Not of plenty experience at the highest level of office, and we really want to see how they will roll out their plans. How are they going to create the jobs? In what sector? ICT, agriculture? What are the plans really? How are they going to handle education, healthcare? We've seen incessant strikes by public teachers here in Senegal. That's one issue that they will also need to address. And in terms of infrastructure, I think they're very good at infrastructure. You can actually give them 60 to 7% in terms of infrastructure. But again, unemployment, yes, is really high, and no doubt. But they also need to find a way of putting things in place to ensure that people have this, especially the young people who really campaign for them. Yes, they played a big role in the couple of days that they campaigned. Yes, and that gave us what we are seeing now, the result we are seeing now. So there's a whole lot on their table that they need to do. Unemployment, Senegal will be an oil and gas producing country by December, so they need to review the contracts, the licenses, and all of that. The aged, the healthcare, women. These are some of the things that they hope to look at when they come in. Again, the interesting part will be seeing the people that will make up their cabinet. We've known the likes of Macky Sall in the last 5 years to bring on board technocrats. I mean, people who have worked either with the EU, with the World Bank, professors, economies, top shots in his cabinet. But for Jemai Faye, we don't know if we really don't have an idea how this cabinet or what it will look like. I must say, we don't have an idea. We don't know what will happen. We're still celebrating the fact that, yes, we have a new president, and he's still going about across the country thanking people, appreciating their support, but we need to see what he will do in the coming days. April 2 is the inauguration date, and then maybe he will swing into action by then.
As soon as possible, and probably hit the ground running. Well, I do understand the euphoria of, people right now happy about the whole, oh, he's the president, that's who we voted for, and that's good, and we've gotten, I was looking at his visuals on the screen just now, and I can say not for a fact, but at least people of that stature we see in African politics are mostly behind the political figures themselves. And mostly the ones behind the political figures hailing them, oh, go right on, sir. They are behind the aged, the ones that are older, they are the one hailing them. But seeing such a young person being at the forefront is really a good one. But if we move away from the euphoria and look at what political strength does he actually have, because I do remember one of the things he mentioned is reconciliation. And this has been there has been a very big divide in Senegal during the 12 years reign of Macky Sall, which he's hoping to really tackle. But let's move away from just Senegal now. Let's look at what Senegal represents as Africa. In Africa, what's the implication of Faye's win for Africa's political landscape, knowing that this is rare, it's not so common, and the electoral process, as you've said, is unique, and there's a lot to learn from. In just a few words.
Well, they've always described Senegal as the beacon of democracy, and they've shown and proven to be that in this election. This was a litmus test for them, looking at the chaos and the political turmoil which they've gone through in the past 2 years. And then, you talked about reconciliation. Yes, that's a very big part of what they plan to do, and it's part of the reconciliation that brought them into power. If President Macky Sall had not come up with the amnesty law, which was approved by the parliament, I don't think this two and other political prisoners will be out. So there's a need for that reconciliation to happen across the divides. Different people haven't been happy with President Macky Sall, not because of how he has run the country, but perhaps he's allowing influence of foreign countries like France. That has been their major problem. And I hope that when they come on board, a dialogue will be the first thing, a national dialogue, because people are proposing call for a national dialogue, that will be inclusive, include everybody of all tribes, and then of all political divide, religious leaders, and then look at how you can review the constitution. I must say that Senegal found itself in a very dire situation in the last 2 years, because whatever happened in the last 3 months was not doesn't have any provision in their constitution. So it was a very unique situation for them. But how were they able to handle that? The highest electoral body, the Constitutional Council, where those we call the 7 wise men, in their wisdom, were able to look at some of the decisions taken by the president and counter most of them. And that's why we're able to hold the election on March 24. Other than that, we will still be waiting till December 15, which was the initial date that President Macky Sall proposed, but that was objected by the council. So there's a whole lot other African countries can learn. Ghana is the next country holding its presidential election. They need to look at this also. In terms of organizing the election itself, it's been very seamless. A whole lot of money went into this, no doubt, because of the back and forth, the initial printing of ballot papers and all of that, and then the cancellation and the reprinting, so much was spent into that. But again, if you look at how that process went, it was very smooth and very transparent. I keep on saying you can't have multiple cards and yet you are disenfranchised. In this country, we are of the age of 18 and you have just a national ID card. I'm not talking about voter's card. I'm not talking about the driver's NIMC card. I'm talking about VIO card, just a national ID that shows where you're from, and the ECOWAS. You can vote. And that was what helped them in having over 7 million voters, on March 24. So there's a whole lot other countries can learn in terms of ensuring that, look, we protect this democracy. There's trouble brewing in Mali, there's trouble brewing in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, because these junta leaders don't want to respect the transition timeline. So wait to see what plays out.
All right, Imor, I mean, we can definitely continue this
I'm
conversation
telling you.
comparing, the Senegalese
let's not
election
compare,
with
let's just leave
every other
that.
African country, especially the one that we're very familiar with. But we're not going to do that. Thank you so much, Imor, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts as well.
Yes.
All right, we go on a short break. I really would have wanted to, chip in a thing or two from what I got from, Senegalese election, but we do not have time. Maybe when we come back, we're going to give a recap of it. But this is the Report Desk Africa, and we're not done yet, because when we come back, we're taking a whole look at another issue that is, challenging Africa, and we're bringing it down to Nigeria. So stay with us.
Welcome back, and this is still RDA Report Desk Africa. And now we move to the West Africa, Nigeria, Delta State specifically, where recently has grappled with violence following the unrest caused by the killings of military personnel and is now just trying to repair a journey. The events happened earlier this month and have left residents in the state fearful, one that might be hard to shake off. The aftermath of that incident is what the government seeks to change off, as provisions for housing has been made for the families of the deceased and scholarships offered to the kids from the president. Now, joining us to discuss this is our own correspondent, Austin Azu, who is currently in Ughelli, Delta State. Austin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good evening. How are you doing?
So it's been challenging, and I want to believe it's been the same for residents of the state, although I get that the incident happened in their state, and of course some miscreants, if I could put it that way, committed this heinous act by killing the military officers. 17 of them dismembered, and in fact I heard it took about almost 72 hours to recover some of their vital organs, which is quite sad. But I can't imagine what kind of fear or what kind of ambience it is right there in Ughelli. And as of now, do you have access to that particular community?
First and foremost, we just left one of the traditional headquarters of Okwama community, which is Ewo, and it's very unfortunate that the busy town called Ewo is gradually losing its population due to the fact that what happened in one of their communities, which is Okwama community, has brought a lot of fears into most of them. So as we speak at the moment, the residents of Okwama community has fled and they are no longer in the community. And for now, nobody has been able to gain access into the community. The military has not given that approval. And to tell you that even when the governor wanted to go to the community, he couldn't access the community because of security reports. But how, by and large, I think is 2 weeks thereabout, but we have not been able to, gain access to the community to find out what is happening in the community or what has happened so far in the community. We don't know what the military tends to achieve with this, but we believe that if the media have been given access to the community, they will be able to give us another information regarding to what has happened in the community. Fine and good, very, very bad that the soldiers were killed in their own blood. And this is not the character of most of the people who are from this area. So no one can actually say for now that it was, it was all the community members that this dastardly act. Very good that the military has been able to unveil to Nigerians those who they are looking for. So it means that various communities that the military has gone to research, to investigate, and to get those perpetrators arrested. I believe the society cannot be looking forward anywhere to get such people. They'll be able to provide the relevant information. From what we gathered so far, the residents of former community that fled, they are still hoping and begging for healthcare assistance and food. Most of them have been living in the bushes for the past 14 days. So you can imagine the kind of suffering most of these people will be going through. The children, the women, and the elderly ones. So it's very pathetic as we speak at the moment because Okwama community, as we speak, the military are still there and nobody has gone there to ascertain the level of development in the community so far.
All right, Austin, while we're still hoping that we'll get access to the residents of the community and find out what firsthand what they're experiencing currently, there are speculations that the people of this community are somewhat complicit because they are not exactly willing. They would rather engage in media propaganda than help fish out the perpetrators. And, the debate has been whether or not it's because there is a general distrust and hatred for not just military people now, but security personnel. And then, leading a lot of people to say that the military are not against us, because some people now see this as, it's good for them. They're not doing enough. That's on one hand. But another set of people believe that maybe they're being threatened by the actual perpetrators of this. So that disparity exists, whether or not the people of the community are just not willing to work with, the security agencies to fish out the perpetrators, or they're being threatened and, shot up by some means.
No, I don't really know how you got your information, but from what we gathered on the field here, the people are willing to give information. But the presence of the military has not encouraged them to some extent, because most of them are, have taken off to their various place of hideout. So it's very difficult for most of them to come out to speak. Even when you want to speak to them on camera, you hardly see anyone who will come before the camera to speak because of your fear of the unknown. Now, the president has given a directive long ago that a panel of inquiry should be set up to investigate the cause of this, incidents, and the governor has equally provided that avenue. But meanwhile, other persons are equally saying that there should be an independent panel to investigate this activity that took place there. Now, I believe this time around it should be left for the panel of inquiry to go into the investigation and be able to report back. So it will not be out of place if the military are willing to collaborate with civilians and even their sister security agencies, which the police have a very key role to play in this aspect. If they are able to come together and say, okay, we need intelligence, we work with this intelligence provided, I believe by now we might have heard, we might have gone to a very far place than where we are now, still looking for those who might decide to have fled the states, who might decide to have, gone very far. So it's very difficult for you to get these people with the kind of approach that I believe the military are applying this time around. So there's need for them to work with civilians, work with sister security agencies to be able to get these people arrested so that peace and normalcy will return to the Kwama community.
Thank you so much, Austin, for that quick feedback and updates from the field there. Thank you. Please keep safe.
Most welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Austin. Well, it's quite sad, to be honest. I think that situations like this is what makes us realize that as a country, we do not exactly give enough props to these security agencies, right? Their lives are also at risk, and a lot of times they go out of their way. We reckon that that incident happened because they were responding to a distress call in that community, and then having to lose their lives while on the duty. Kudos to the government, for the scholarship opportunities to their children and all. But I think that this is a reminder of how much work these persons are putting in. Well, maybe we're not there yet. We're not, doing all we can yet. So a lot of times there'll be, a little bit of slander here and there, but these people are doing the best that they can.
My first worry is the military is not supposed to be interfering or be called into internal crisis, and that's the truth. That's the work of the police. That's the work of the state police. Yeah. That's the work of internal security. The military is supposed to be by the border, helping us safeguarding the country from external threats. And there's been a lot of conversation as to why the military was there in the first place, and a lot of narrative on TV, on media, and I don't want to bring anyone here so I don't actually corrupt people's minds as to what to believe or not. But let's hope that, as the president has said, an inquiry committee has been set up, and they're actually digging deep to understand what will warrant you having 17 military officers, 4 officers, 13 soldiers, a colonel, major, big ranking military personnel, and you have them go there for a peacekeeping mission. There are so many questions as to that. And currently now, the people that could tell the fact, which are the journalists, the member of the Fourth Estate of the Realm, are not even, allowed access to that same place to actually even speak with these people. Now, you can't speak to them. So now there are different narratives out there, and no one can actually confirm. The journalist can confirm, and I would really charge us sincerely to do more, to dig deep and get more information as to what exactly transpired, what happened to these people. I remember there was a video that circulated recently of a guy who claimed to be part of those who engaged in the massacre, because I would call it a massacre, because there's a difference between trying to, attack people border off people who are trying to come and attack you, then dismembering them, removing their vital organs.
Seems more like a planned attack.
It seems more like a planned attack. So there's so much to it. If this is just for a peacekeeping mission to come and settle a community rift, then it shouldn't be this bad. Then there are so many questions we need to ask. But yeah, as you said, we'll give kudos to the governor, to the government for the things they've provided. And for some of the things, let me just list them here. And 17 officers were rewarded honored with the posthumous national honors in 3 categories: Member of the Order of the Niger, Federal Republic Medal 1, and of course 2. And the things the government provided for them are for the families of the slain soldiers, houses, anywhere of their choices. I just wish this was done earlier, because when I look back at all these promises,
as you're reading it, remember, like after
houses, a scholarship for their children to university, even the unborn child, slain soldiers, all their benefits be paid to them. And these are issues we've raised even while these military officers were alive, even down to every security personnel, even to the police, even to the neighborhood watch. That what is the care given to them as regards welfare? For the people who risk their life, because what they practically do is they put their life in front and put, others behind, because they need to safeguard the country. And it's a whole big question we need to ask about security, reaction, or being proactive.
Yeah, I think one thing that you said that is really profound is the aspect of, and this is something that we've always talked about, it doesn't just apply to security personnel now, but like giving people their flowers while they're still alive. You're reading this honor conferred on them, and I'm just like, after their death, they're not doing anything with it if they didn't have a good life while they were alive. And I'm really hoping that there is a follow-up. I think it's looking really feasible, and again, kudos to the government, but I'm really hoping that it's not just a temporary thing, that okay, we just give them money and the families, and then they sort out themselves, and years back they're back to where they started. That's one. And then on the other hand, you did say something else that was very profound, and that is allowing speculations to fly around. We've always had this challenge where you say you look into something, you don't do it on time, and then you allow people to start saying things that may not be true. And then the media that is supposed to be there as the gatekeepers of the truth, even if you're going to do a more in-depth research, in-depth investigation of what happened, it is our job as the media persons, because the truth is we owe people
that information.
The exact information of what happened. And if it takes time and these people don't get that information, then you won't fault them for going about with what they heard. Look at the question I asked Austin. It's a very valid thing, because a lot of people are going about saying that the community does not want to talk because they don't like the military, and that may not be the case.
How can you talk with such military presence? Well, the trust gap is still there.
Exactly. So, but because we're not getting enough, we're just hearing, we're investigating. For how long? We don't know. What exactly transpired? We don't know. And this is something that we're supposed to have gotten to the bottom of, if not even for the general public, for the families of this. I mean, looking at this video, it's really disheartening to see the families. They don't have answers. They don't know what happened.
No closure.
It's just really sad.
It's really sad. Yes, we know we've gotten assurance from the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, who has vowed to hunt down the perpetrators of this heinous crime. But I feel we need to look at the issue more holistically. Insecurity generally. So this is happening deep down. Here in Delta. Something has been going on in the northern part of Nigeria for days. We just had about 130 children returned back, and there are some that are still in captivity. There's still a whole lot of things that needs to be done by this government to ensure that security of lives and property is germane. It's important because it affects economy, it affects investment. No one wants to come and partner with a country that is unstable. And these are things that they really need to put a check to. So while the Chief of Staff is doing a lot to, I won't say take revenge, but of course do the necessary thing, which is justice, to get the people who actually committed this act get them prosecuted, we also need to look holistically and ensure that justice is served to every other person that has found themselves in this kind of situation.
And I'm really hoping that we do not even mention rehabilitation of the perpetrators, because that's what's going to
Oh
get
no,
Nigerians
please,
angry.
let's not
because
get
that's the new norm now.
Yeah.
You're rehabilitating
Bandits,
internet fraudsters,
yeah.
and rehabilitating bandits, rehabilitating people who should be suffering in jail. And if you ask them, the reason is they're trying to decongest prison cells. Justice needs to be meted out.
Yeah.
Well,
That's really been a big one on the episode today, but that's all we can give to you. We'll quickly go into our forecast, and we'll start with the Togo's opposition party as it calls for protest. Togolese activists and opposition have called for protests to stop the country's president from signing off on a new constitution that would scrap future presidential elections and could see future
powering, I think.
This is interesting. And of course, the next one is in Nigeria, where Tinubu forms a team to combat failing economy. President Bola Tinubu has formed a task force to come up with the emergency solutions to fix the country's ailing economy, that's severe economic difficulties, and have led to widespread hardship and mounted pressure on his administration.
I'm going to see if we can take one more before we go. Ethiopia, the country's biggest bank, says it has recovered nearly 80% of the cash it lost during what it says was a glitch in its system that allowed customers to take out more money than they had in their accounts. Abe Sano, the president of the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, disclosed that around $14 million was withdrawn or digitally transferred during the error. Although nearly 15,000 people have voluntarily returned funds taken illegally, about 567 individuals are yet to return theirs. This is one story that I would really love to
It looks like everybody was waiting for the glitch.
I'm telling
like, oh, come on, it's down. Let's go get more
that
money.
glitch was helpful to a lot of people. But we're definitely going to follow up on these stories.
Yes,
That's
we
the
will.
much we can take on Report Desk Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Blessings Musugu.
And I am Ni Omani. Bye for now.